Welcome to the February episode of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda from Cinetopia and your host for the show. And on this month, I'm joined by show regulars Gary Arnott and Simon Bowie, where we have some really great films to review and discuss. First up is Cord Jefferson's debut feature, American Fiction, starring Jeffrey Wright. And secondly is Jonathan Glazer's new film, The Zone of Interest, which did quite well at the BAFTAs this weekend. Finally, we review Steve McQueen's monumental documentary film, Occupied City. And I sit down with Martín Benchimol, Argentinian director of the docu-fiction film The Castle, which is having its Scottish premiere at no other than our Cinetopia doc in collaboration with Iberodoc's 10th edition event at Cameo Cinema this Wednesday, 21st of February at 7 p.m. Martín and I talk about how he decided to make this genre-bending film, working with real-life characters to reenact their story and craft it into what I think is a gorgeous and touching movie. Plus, we go through some of our favorite picks of this year's Glasgow Film Festival, which is starting at the end of the month on 28th of February to the 10th of March. And Gary and Simon have some tips on what to bet if you're planning to put a few dollars or fill out your Oscar ballot this year. That's all on our show, so stay tuned. And today we're here with Gary and Simon. Gary, how have you been? How's your new year been? I haven't seen you talk. We haven't talked to you since then.
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me back, Amanda. Yeah, it's just been really good. It's been full on with the films. Obviously, we're like deep in award season, so there seems to be 2 or 3 new releases that have been great every week. I feel like it's been such a high standard so far this year. So,
yeah. And speaking of award season, we might get a little bit into that. But I was in the States for the first part of January, so I caught a lot of. I was at this right time zone to watch some of these like red carpets, which I love. But yeah, so interesting things happening this year. And Simon, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me back. Yeah, good, thank you. Like Gary, I think I'm just sort of bracing myself for the upcoming period of Oscars season and Glasgow Film Festival's coming up, which I know we'll discuss. Yeah, it's just an exciting time to look forward to films.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is, like you said, Glasgow season. It's coming up. We'll be doing a Glasgow special as we normally do next month. But the program has come out, and maybe we could just chat a little bit about some films that you're excited to see, the both of you, for which is coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think the program looks super strong. There's lots of films on there that have been doing really well over the festival circuits, and are actually there's some that are nominated for Oscars that Glasgow have got in their lineup, like Io Capitano and Teachers Lounge. They're both nominated in the international category. And then there's a real buzzy title, that's the opening film, Love Lies Bleeding, which is Rose Glass's next film after doing Saint Maud, which was really great and popular.
I'm super looking forward to that. I loved Saint Maud. Like, that was such a strong debut, and I really can't wait to see how she follows it up.
Yeah, there's another. I'll just give a quick mention. There's a psychological thriller called Tummy Monster about a tattoo artist, which looks really interesting, and it's got a Scottish actor called Lauren MacDonald in it. So that's high up on my list to see as well. But yeah, maybe get into that later on.
Yeah, I've got tickets for La Chimera, which is a new film from Alicia Vorvacker, which I'm excited about. Lousy Carter, Woken, Sorcery. There's a good kind of folk horror selection I've found this year. So I'm seeing Sorcery, Woken, The Vordelak, just quite a lot of folk horror, it seems, from across Europe, which is great. It's nice to see that micro-genre kind of break out of its English shackles.
Yeah, no, I didn't notice that, but that is really interesting. I'm gonna have to check out a lot of those because I have like a new fascination with folk horror. I also wanted to pull out that we'll be actually screening it in Edinburgh in April, but the film Cemetery Cinema is a documentary about a filmmaker who is interested in finding the first film of Guinea and goes around the entire country to try to find it. And it's a gorgeous film, and it's sort of fun and enjoyable as well, and sort of talking about how important the archives are of a country, but also how controlled they are as well, and what people sort of consider historically important films. It's a gorgeous film, and it's having its, I believe, UK but Scottish premiere at Glasgow Film Festival. So I recommend people in Glasgow checking it out, and if they don't get to, hopefully you'll see that in our program for Doc later on in the year.
One other one I'll mention. I've not seen any reviews of it so far, but interested to see that Ewan McGregor and his daughter Clara McGregor are starring in a film together, playing father and daughter, and that's called Bleeding Love. It's directed by Emma Westenberg. So that's another one that I've got on my list. I've got a link for that. So
I keep getting that confused with Love Lies Bleeding for obvious reasons. So
yeah.
I can never remember if I'm seeing Love Lies Bleeding or Bleeding Love.
Well, we're all looking forward to the Glasgow Film Festival, which is starting on the 28th of February to the 10th of March. Go to their website and check out their program. And as mentioned, we will be doing a full special of reviews of a few films and hopefully some interviews as well as part of that, as we do every year. So stay tuned for that. So as I briefly mentioned, we'll be screening The Castle on Wednesday, the 21st of February, as part of our Cinetopia doc series that happens every month. But we're doing this in collaboration with Iberodocs. So Iberodocs is Scotland's Ibero-American Documentary Film Festival, which is celebrating its 10th edition. And in the program this year, it's from the 21st to the 2nd of March. There's 6 feature films: The Castle from Argentina, one from Panama, from Brazil, and Spain, of course. So if you check out their program, you'll see some really great films. They're playing at the CCA, also at Glasgow Film Theatre and the French Institute in Edinburgh. So I highly recommend checking out their program and coming to one of those films, and hope to see you there.
How did you come to write this book?
What really struck me was that too few books were about my people. Where are our stories? Where's our representation?
Would you give us the pleasure of reading an excerpt?
Yo, Sharonda, girl, you be pregnant again? If I is, Ray Ray's gonna be a real father this time around. Thank
you. Monk, your books are good, but they're not popular. Editors, they want a black book.
They have a black book. I'm black, and it's my book.
You know what I mean.
Look at what they publish. Look at what they expect us to write. I just want to rub their noses in it.
So on to our films of February. We have quite a lot of award season sort of big films that are out right now. So many films, actually. It's some incredible. It's great to go to the multiplex and see like a lot of films you want to see, I think. I mean, not just the multiplex, but if you live near one, which I do. And there's just been a lot of films that I've wanted to see, and it's exciting. And one of them I saw recently, and we're all going to talk about, is American Fiction. So Gary, tell us a little bit about that film, and we'll discuss it afterwards.
Yeah, so American Fiction is the directorial debut from Cord Jefferson. He previously worked as a writer on TV shows like The Good Place and Master of None. So his debut is called American Fiction, and it follows a guy called Thelonious Ellison, who gets called Monk, and he's a college professor in LA, and he's also a novelist. And his books are critically acclaimed, but they're never commercially successful. So he's a bit of a disgruntled writer, and his kind of frustrations lead to kind of like a lack of professionalism, you could say, with his students, which leads to him taking a bit of a sabbatical, and he goes home to visit his family. So it starts off, there's a family drama going on, but then there's also a lot of satirical comedy whereby he writes a book as a kind of backlash parody to the types of books that have been successful that talk about the Black experience. And he's getting a little bit fed up with the way that mainstream media picks up on these types of stories. So as a kind of joke, he drunkenly writes his own version of it. And of course, it gets picked up by publishers and it becomes his best-selling novel. So he kind of has to like run along with his own joke under an alias. So there's lots of ideas packed into this film. There's like the satire, but there's also a quite tender family drama going on at the same time. And I think lesser films could kind of get muddled between the kind of two narrative threads that are running through it. But I think there's such a good balance to this. And I think each side of the film, the comedy and the drama, kind of like prop the other one up in terms of like having a really complex leading character in Monk. And I think it's a great performance from Jeffrey Wright. He's nominated for an Oscar for it. It's great to see him in a leading role because we're so used to seeing him in supporting roles in big franchises like Hunger Games and like the James Bond movies. So it's great to see him taking that more pivotal role. So I'm interested to see what you guys think. I love this film. I gave it 5 stars. But yeah, interested to see what you guys thought of it.
Yeah, just on the Jeffrey Wright point, I think it's, way past time for him to get meaty leading roles because he's just an excellent actor. For me, we talked about it when it came out, but he's terrific in Asteroid City, the new Wes Anderson film. And I think I've just been waiting for him to get, a good meaty film role since he was in Westworld, where he's a programmer of robots, also maybe a robot. He's very good in that. So he is very good in this, and I think his performance really carries the film through some of its more slow periods in the script. He carries all the family drama bits. He's the satire where he's pretending to be two different people, where he is himself kind of a upper to middle class academic, an intelligent, cultured guy, but he also has to play this character of this lower class black man. Well, he's a black man when he's the middle class professor as well, but he's, this lower class black man who has written this book. And he plays both very well. Like, you can see his discomfort in playing the lower class pseudonym. His pseudonym's Stag Ali, and he's very good at playing up to white people's stereotypes of black people. So he's great. Like you say, I think it blends these two elements of the film very well. For me, I thought the family drama elements of the film are the strongest. And, I don't want to talk about the trailer too much, but the marketing for this film I found quite confusing because it's very much focused on the satire part and not the family drama part, which is a good 60% of the film, I would say. So it's you get most of the satire in the film from the trailer, and it really doesn't represent the complexity of this film, the threading of these two narratives in a way I would have expected. Like I say, I think the family drama part is among the best stuff in the film, and the satire needed a little more bite.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I maybe disagree. I liked the film too, and I think I probably feel that as you both said quite right, Jeffrey Wright deserved. I enjoyed him in the French Dispatch as well, and sort of just love his voice and sort of his presence, and I think really carries a film. So it shows that a film can be carried by this, and deservingly nominated quite across, a lot of awards, events, or whatnot during the season. I do think it was funny. I mean, it is funny. I did get this. I thought the satire was great, and it did make me laugh like out loud. So, So I quite enjoyed it. And I just saw it right next to Holdovers too, which I feel like has a little bit similar sort of a thing where it's both touching and sad and funny at the same time, but obviously totally different subjects. I did think, as you know, I didn't really know it was a debut feature, but I did think sometimes I didn't know where when I came out of it, I was like, this isn't the best film I've seen this year. There was holes here and there, or maybe it's just the editing or sort of like, you know, the packaging of it. So it's almost like it was a romantic comedy, or like you said, like a family thing, but then also the satire. So sometimes like between those two worlds, I didn't feel like they meshed completely, or that, but I enjoyed it. So it's like, I don't want to say I didn't like the film because I came out of it having had a good time, but I didn't necessarily always find that it was the most polished film. But of course, it's a first direction from the Cord Jefferson, so a great debut, especially, and it's been getting all this like really good reviews as well.
I think I'd say the same. That there does seem to be moments when the two narratives are isolated from one another, and I would have liked to see more interweaving of the two. Just on the satire point, I don't. Well, I sort of semi-work in the publishing industry, so I expected perhaps more bite in the satire towards the publishing industry and this drive to publish certain voices, but only to have certain representation of those voices, you know. And I think I just expected more bite. Really, it's hard to define what I was looking for, but just, I don't know, a stronger critique of the publishing industry and of entertainment in general for wanting to represent only one side of, say, in this case, the Black experience.
I think it's interesting what you said, Simon, about the way that the film's been marketed, because I was, I guess, lucky to see this film at a preview where I hadn't seen a trailer for it at all. So I didn't,
right.
aside from maybe reading a headline that it was a satirical comedy, I knew nothing about. I hadn't seen any things from the family stuff, so I went and blinked it, and like you said, Amanda, laughed out loud numerous times. I think, like, yeah, it was hilarious. Like, when it's funny, it can be very, very funny. And I think, like, sometimes with satirical comedies, when there's no emotional backbone to the film, it can kind of get, like, I don't know, like a little bit cruel, or it can like verge over into being silly, some of the comedy. But I think I would argue that the family drama almost grounds the satire in a way, because Monk feels like a real person. It feels like he's complicated, he's flawed, he makes mistakes through the film, but you can't help but like root for him. And I guess like having that little romantic comedy thread running through it as well, where he meets his mum's neighbor. So that is a little subplot. And like I said, there are so many ideas going on in this, which I think maybe is a bit of a symptom of it being a first feature, where you kind of get to direct your first film and you kind of try and cram all the ideas that you've got into one thing. But I do think that there's enough tonal balance that he manages it very well. So I think it deserves the plaudits. At least I think it'll be up there. I think maybe this is a big statement, but I feel like already it will be up there with my films of the year when it comes to the end of this year.
Of the end of this year, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's. I was talking to someone the other day who perhaps might join us in future Cinetopia shows. You know, it's films that you might want, like films that you see and say, wow, that's good, but I only want to see that once. And I think this is the kind of film I would watch again and probably get a lot out of, and laugh again and enjoy again. And so I think that's another positive to that. I think just maybe I saw bits of stuff that felt unpolished or sort of like abrupt, but other than that, I would say I agree with you both that I enjoyed both sides of it and really thought it was really fun.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Sterling K. Brown as well, who plays Monk's brother, who has recently discovered that he's gay and is living a new life and becomes embroiled in the family drama that's going on with Monk and the family. He's really good in the role. He's a really good supporting role that clearly establishes his character with different motivations and different drives to Monk, but is still very understandable, very sympathetic. It's a very strong supporting performance, and I can see why it's been nominated at the Academy Awards for Best Supporting. And I hope he wins.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah, I think he was great, and I think what was really great about his character is that they didn't he wasn't in the film that much in terms of like the screen time, which meant that the scenes that he was in, he really like elevated it, and I think he brings a different type of humor to it, which just adds another layer. And he also has he has his own trauma and frustrations, like Monk, kind of like Monk does, because they're brothers, but their kind of their frustrations and their trauma come from completely different places. So it's interesting to watch that their relationship develop as well throughout the film.
It's that grounding that you mentioned. He really brings that grounding to Monk's story, I think, because that you really get a sense of when they get together. They kind of revert to their childhood brother status. Which kind of happens when you meet up with your siblings and you're all grown up. But also has his own life, and he has his own struggles, like you say. He has his own difficulties, and it really balances that sense of being, childhood brothers, but also now being grown men and having to contend with that relationship dynamic changing a little.
Great. So American Fiction is still out in the cinemas and hopefully for a little bit longer, so you can check it out. And also, I'm sure we'll be streaming soon. But it's up for the Oscars. So one of the ones that won, I think, is like you mentioned, a few of the main and supporting roles are nominated and are good contenders for it, as well as the film itself. So fingers crossed for them. I'm not sure it will win, but who knows? I don't know if you guys have predictions on the best film that might win this year. I always like to throw it out there. I know some of us are bigger Oscar fans than others, but Gary, do you have any predictions?
Well, I think Oppenheimer is like the front runner, and it kind of a lot like every year. I think at this stage, a lot of the categories do seem quite sewn up. Oppenheimer seems to be pretty nailed on to win Best Picture, but I have heard I get really into the awards race and kind of like the
betting.
Yeah, the betting and like I don't know. I kind of like love that Coda kind of came from nowhere last year and won like in the last month. It kind of like had this little surge, and I have been hearing rumblings that the Zone of Interest might be a bit of a challenger to Oppenheimer, but I don't know. I don't know. It still feels a little unlikely, but I do think that there's some tight races with that in the acting categories. The race that I guess I'm the most selfishly invested in is the Emma Stone versus Lily Gladstone race for Best Actress, because I put a bet on Emma Stone way back.
Yeah, you put that on ages ago, I saw.
Yeah, Venice Film Festival, I put the bet on at 8-1, and now she's odds-on favourite, so I'm rooting for her. But yeah, it's Stone against Gladstone. So yeah, I think that's probably the most interesting race. But I do think that the Best Actor race as well still feels quite open between Cillian Murphy and Paul Giamatti, with Bradley Cooper was kind of in the running, and now it feels like he's kind of out of the running, but again, that might change. So yeah, but I think a lot of the technical ones seem quite sewn up, but it could all change. I've still got like the BAFTAs this weekend, and then what's the other, the SAG awards that I think come like a week before the Oscars, so that always like kind of throws a spanner in the works of the races. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes.
I think it's going to be an Oppenheimer sweep. I think Oppenheimer for Best Picture, Cillian Murphy for Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, which is quite boring. But it's the way I see things going. So I've been inspired by you, Gary. I've put a few bets on. But I am hoping Zone of Interest wins Best Picture, because I put couple of pounds on there, and the returns on that are very good.
Yeah,
Because apparently the bookies do not think it will win. We'll talk about Zone of Interest, but I think best sound design, it has to win that. Like,
Yeah.
anyone who has seen it, there is no way you can walk out of it without being aware of the sound design. And I've put Ryan Gosling on for Barbie, actually, for best supporting. So we'll see. I don't think Barbie's going to get a lot of awards, but I think maybe Ryan Gosling, which I don't think will go down well with the public, but that's what I see happening.
It would go down well with me. I'm a huge Ryan Gosling fan and a huge Barbie fan. I actually think that that's a category where Oppenheimer it'll be part of its suite, because I do think Robert Downey Jr. is going to win. In that category. But yeah, the bets. I had a little flutter on Zone of Interest as well, so I'm interested to see if those odds drop, because I think it was at like 33-1, and now it's at 28-1. So maybe in the next couple of weeks it'll keep dropping, but we'll see and keep an eye on it.
I've also got money on Jodie Foster for Best Supporting Actress for Naiad, which I hadn't heard of at all, and seems to be this year's coda for me, in that it's a film that seemed to come out of nowhere to get quite a few awards nominations. So I don't know. I think Jodie Foster might surprise us.
Do you think so?
I for supporting actress, I think Divine Randolph for The Holdovers is like a step on.
That's a good shout.
But yeah, it's still there's stranger things have happened. Like there's always, the Oscars tend to throw up one or two upsets. So you never know.
Yeah, I mean, the films I want to win, and the people I wanted to win didn't even get nominated. So, that's fine. I mean, Greta Gerwig not getting nominated was one of those things where I know was all over the commentary, but I was disappointed in that. I thought we could have had 2 to 3 women this year in the director category. Past Lives as well, sort of getting. I liked Anatomy of Fall, so I like Justine Triet, so I'm happy with that. And also find it funny that the French didn't even nominate that as their, film for the Oscars, and yet it's done so well. So that's amusing in myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, as you were just saying, supporting actor, I think I really loved The Holdovers as a film. Like, I wish I had seen it at Christmas, because I saw it post Christmas and was over Christmas, but it was such a fun, comfortable film. It's a films like that I kind of miss, films I miss seeing, back from so I just really like Alexander Payne stuff, and I think Divine Joy Randolph is the best part of that film. So I'm rooting for that part of and Paul Giamatti, of course. So I'm rooting for that, and I think Paul Giamatti has a possibility of it could happen. Very unlikely, as you have been checking the betting and the chances. But I agree with you, Simon. I think Oppenheimer will sweep. We saw that happen with the Golden Globes, where it was pretty much Oppenheimer all night on the drama side. And yeah, I mean, I think I can be honest to say I'm disappointed. But I mean, I don't dislike that film, but I didn't find it even Christopher Nolan's best film. So I think it's like throwing him some Oscars, because he's have his career in the past.
It's his turn, as it often happens with these kind of big awards.
Yeah, and it's a safe bet for everyone to say, oh yeah, we what a great film. It's not a bad film. It's just it didn't inspire me like some of these other films we're talking about, and probably should have started this after we talked about Zone of Interest. But Zone of Interest is one of those films that maybe I won't watch The Holdovers every Christmas, but it's probably one of the most it's my favorite film of the year in terms of being an incredible film that you are wowed at. So overall, I think if we were to say best film, that to me should win. Most enjoyable, and so happy that it exists, Barbie, but I don't think that anyone's gonna pick that one out. I think that's low on the betting at this stage. It will be very likely be an Oppenheimer sweep, which is one of those years when it's Titanic-ish, and it gets me angry. So I'm not even sure if I'll stay up all night and watch it.
I've noticed, talking about staying up all night and watching it, I think this is going to be the first year in many years that I am going to do it because
Oh, nice.
it's on ITV in the UK this year.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe
Oh,
that
well,
changes
that changes
things.
things. Yeah, because I always have to know. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I have to get, that like free Sky, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
By
usually only
all,
on Sky.
yeah, so I think it's usually, I think the past few years it's been on like Sky Cinema or something, but I've read this year that it's going to be on ITV. So I think I'm going to stay up and then like work from home the following day, like zombie-eyed. But yeah, I'm looking forward. And
No,
we've got the BAFTAs this weekend as well.
I'll stay up all night to be disappointed, which, but yeah, we'll see with BAFTAs too.
Yeah.
What happens? We'll talk about it afterwards when we come back next month. Okay, another Oscar contender that we're talking about and is currently in cinemas around the UK is The Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer's latest film. And Simon, tell us about this film.
Yes, so The Zone of Interest is the latest film from Jonathan Glazer, who hasn't directed a feature film since Under the Skin 10 years ago. His kind of metaphysical alien film set in Glasgow, actually. So it's been 10 years because he has been working on this very intensely from what I've read about the film. He optioned the novel by Martin Amis before the novel came out, and the film is, I haven't read the book, but it's loosely based on the novel, I understand. And yeah, Jonathan Glazer has done a lot of historical research into the period that the film is set in and the location that the film is set in. So it's set during the Holocaust in a house on the very outskirts of Auschwitz extermination camp. And the film follows the family of Rudolf Hess, who was the commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau and lived right next to the extermination camp with his family, with Hedwig, played by Sandra Huller, and their children. And they have this kind of idyllic life next to the camp. They go swimming in the local river. They ride horses through these kind of lush, bountiful fields, and they have a beautiful garden that Hedwig is very, very fond of and very protective of. But all the time, throughout the film, throughout these idyllic shots of kind of rural, bucolic beauty, there is this hum, this low hum of machinery that never goes away. And you wonder, you start to wonder how they can ignore this hum. How aren't they always picking up on this hum of machinery? And gradually this gets mixed in with more sounds in the background. Like I've seen Jonathan Glazer describe it as a parallel film happening in the sound mix, where there's gunshots, there's shouting, you can hear the trains coming. Eventually you can hear the furnaces rumbling. And there is this sound, there is this intense light, and it feels like heat coming from over this wall that we never see past. He never shows the inside of the extermination camp, but we hear things going on there. And kind of the tension of the film is about how can they live this ordinary life? How can't they hear it? How can't they hear this hum that I can't tune out? So sorry, I feel like I've given a rather intense summary there, but I found this film so intense and so meaningful that I really got it got into my head in an incredible way. And it feels strange to say I loved it because it's such an intense film about the Holocaust and about the kind of Hannah Arendt banality of evil stuff, and yet I think I did love it for what it shows, for the intensity of feeling that it drove me to.
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting all like immersed and emotional again just from your introduction to the film. It's a very, very strong film, very strong technically. Like you say, the sound design, it does feel like there's a parallel film happening on the outside of the central thread of this film. I think it's interesting that it's one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen, and it's got like a 12 rating or like a PG-13 rating. I guess in the US it'd be because of the way that it kind of holds back these horrors from the main, like the horror. It's all like, I guess it's like kind of like that Jaws thing where it's like the horror that you can't see is like more effective sometimes than the horror that you can see. I think this is like a masterclass in doing that. Just having like these, you can see the smoke from the trains coming in and hear some screams going on in the background. Meanwhile, this family are just going about their day-to-day life. So it's a chilling experience to watch, and it's very I was listening to somebody talk about it and saying how like the visuals of some films almost like teach the audience how to watch their films throughout, and I feel like this one kind of like teaches you how to listen to it throughout because the sound design is so strong. So I feel like that's a really like good way of putting it, because it's very much like an art piece, and it's super powerful. And it's not a film that, well, I feel like I'll maybe watch it again at some point, but it's not a film that you want to like watch repeatedly, I don't think, because it is so chilling. But yeah, what did you think of it, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sort of described how I feel. I mean, especially with your intro too. I think there's something that's so emotional, like deep, especially as someone who's watched. I think we've all watched a lot of World War II films, a lot of Holocaust films, and I think I can be very critical on tone in a film and around this subject. And I think particularly because I'm fascinated with the idea of memory. I know, Simon, you've seen Shoah, but Shoah is this film that very clearly says we can't go back to the archive footage of, or we can't sort of reenact this horror because you can't reenact something so unimaginable. And I think that just the tone of itself of how much painstaking, as you said, research Jonathan Glazer did to do this film is so present in every scene, even though, as you said, it's 12A or PG-13, because I sort of think I went in there thinking I'm going to be like, I might have to walk out of the room. Like if I was watching Schindler's List right now and on a big screen, I probably would have to like take a few moments and whatnot. But there wasn't anything there to completely gross you out like a Titan body horror sort of thing. In fact, it was, as you said, quite beautiful and quite idyllic, this life. But just that tone underneath, that second film, which is all sound, which is horrific. And you can see all the other characters, as much as like Sandra Hüller's character wants to forget it and wants to stay there and wants to pretend this doesn't exist, they're all being affected by it, and I won't give anything away, but, obviously you see each character sort of getting affected by what they're trying to avoid and what they're trying to, forget about, like the mother or even the main character himself. But I'm of two minds too, just of this, is that if you were to not know about the historical elements of the film and what is actually going on, that it doesn't, if you were like a general person, they wouldn't understand the horrors of this in some ways. But I think if people didn't know enough about it, they wouldn't think they wouldn't find it as horrifying, I guess, as my only comment of that, because it's what you know about the situation that makes you feel really like how horrible that sound or that subtleness of it. So as a film, it works incredibly. As maybe an education piece for people who might not know enough about, and who maybe deny it. I don't know if that's not its intention. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that I thought that was quite interesting. The other thing I would just say is I got obsessed with it afterwards and started seeing how, as you did, Simon, like how it was done, and and a lot of the dialogue is straight out of what they said, or it's a lot of the things that happened. And I do also really think it was fascinating the way it was filmed. So it's so beautiful, but yet it was like a surveillance. So there was all these cameras kind of through, like 8 cameras sort of around and stuff like that. So I would want to go back again now that I've learned all that stuff and sort of observe why and how that was filmed in that way, because it was an experiment in of its own way to film and to make a film like that. And I think it's an art piece as much as it's a film. It's a masterpiece. And yeah, I'm glad that it exists in this world, even if it's such a horrific, it gives you such a horrible feeling, because of what it's about.
Yeah, on the point of bringing knowledge to it and the kind of 12A rating, my friend took his kids to it, and I know it led to some interesting discussions about what the Holocaust was and how it impacted people and history. But I don't know. I need to talk to him more about maybe what his kids got out of it and how they experienced it. What the experience was like for them. Because I do think it's like you say, we're coming to the film with knowledge that informs our watching of the film, our interpretation of the soundscape. But if you didn't have that, how would it work for you? It's interesting you bring up Shoah and Claude Lanzmann, the director of Shoah. I'm sure we'll talk about when we talk about Occupied City as well. But yeah, I felt this really was an attempt to stick by Lanzmann's principle that you should not depict the Holocaust. You should not depict what directly went on in the camps, because it is, by its very nature, undepictable. Claude Lanzmann was very critical of Spielberg around Schindler's List and the Auschwitz scene in that, which he felt, cannot represent the horror of what happened, and it's kind of obscene to do so, to try and represent it. And Jonathan Glazer, not gets round that, but abides by that principle while still making a very powerful film about the Holocaust. I read an interview with Sandra Hüller who said her rule for acting as a German actor was that she never wanted to play a Nazi. She would never play a Nazi in any way. But Glazer sat with her and talked to her, and she was so convinced by the kind of rightness of his approach, or the appropriateness of his approach, that she compromised that principle and is playing the wife of a Nazi officer, presumably someone in the Nazi party, for this film. So I think it's a clearly well thought out film, with a lot of consideration going into its depiction of the undepictable, which remains undepictable because it's all there in the sound.
Yeah, Jonathan Glazer seems to be a director that's kind of working on a different level to a lot of people in the way that he felt. I like that he just comes along every 10 years and blows everybody away with like something that he obviously put a lot of like work and dedication into. And it's interesting to see how different audiences might take this film on. Like you say, like if your friend took his kids to see it, it's like feels like it's an important film from an educational standpoint in terms of like the yeah, like letting everyone in on the kind of the emotional impact of the film. And I think like it was interesting, even the title sequence of the film that just like hangs on this, like the title for what feels, I don't know, it's like 5 minutes, 5, 6, 7 minutes of like just the zone of interest and the colors changing and like, and even the sound, then you're kind of like, you know, that you're getting yourself into a art house piece. I think there was a couple of people that walked out of that screening at that point and never made it past the title sequence. And theirs, it wasn't a secret screening, so they knew what they were getting themselves into, I think. But yeah, and I saw some like criticisms of it, calling it like dull or boring, and I think like that's kind of like missing the point of like capturing like the banality of evil, like you say, that it kind of captures. So I do think that for the right audiences, yeah, it's going to have the right effect.
Yeah, I mean, there were elements. I agree with you both, and I think Jonathan Glazer, I mean, I wish made more films than once every 10 years, but appreciate that they take time to sort of conceive. And then sometimes as you're watching them too, like it is a little all over the place, like, you know, like Lynchian narrative, whatever, you know, like what's going on here. Now we have like a red flower or like a red screen or something like that, which I love. But yeah, and the score, we've not even talked about that. Mika Levy, you know, it's sparse to a certain extent. I think they actually made a lot more score, and then they kind of put it, you know, it was all sort of put into the edit, and they pulled stuff out. So the whole sound design and everything just overly thought out, and its impact. But but like his images, the images are beautiful, almost in these kind of Jacques Tati sort of ways, you know, of this idyllic life. But yeah, it's so haunting because you take the rest of the film and the sound and everything, and so your memory of the film when you see the images again are so mixed in terms of your emotion, and yet you could technically say that's a really idyllic shot, you know, with the flowers and the garden and stuff like that as well. So it's something I'm just going to think about, as continue to think about, which is why I rate it as the best film I've seen, or that's in the Oscar contender. I would say it's just the best film.
Yeah, same. That there's a crispness to the images, like they are crisp, digital. I assume digital. They look digital. There's a crisp digital nature to the images that feels like it's almost designed to look the opposite to archive footage. Like it's designed not to look like film from the time. It looks like film from now. You know, it's so crisp and so clear that it deliberately it feels like a deliberate artistic choice to make it as different from archive footage as it could possibly be, which again we can get into when we talk about Occupied City, but feels very like a pointed artistic choice. Yeah, I absolutely loved it as well. It's such an intense film, such an intense experience. When my partner lived in Poland, we went to Krakow, and we went to the Oskar Schindler factory, which is now a Holocaust museum, kind of dedicated to the Polish experience, what happened to Polish Jews, and what happened when the Nazis invaded Poland. And that was a very intense experience for me. I basically couldn't talk for hours after it. We wandered back towards Krakow, towards the ghetto, and I was just in shock, in a very heightened emotional state. This film got me about, you know, some way back to that feeling, which for a film is extraordinary, an extraordinary intensity of emotion. Yeah, I need to see it again, and I would love to see it again in a cinema, because I don't think the sound design would be nearly as effective, you know, at home.
Yeah, it wouldn't be, but I also wonder how it'll be mixed in that way as well, because
Yeah.
it still felt subtle. That there is this point where you go to Auschwitz, the museum now, and it's sort of modern day footage and sort of breaks the story. And I guess that also maybe contradicting myself, but that goes back to, like you said, this crisp sort of footage that's new, but that also shows the depth, the large numbers that you don't see in here, in the film, because what's again on the other side of the wall is that the horror that we can't really fathom and we shouldn't reenact, but yet perhaps that modern day footage is so powerful because there's the numbers that are there, the material that exists, the artifacts of that. And as you said, kind of a lot of people do have that experience where they go and visit these places and see this, and it's haunting and for that experience. But this film does it in a different way, and very, very serious film, very an incredible film, and one that we'll keep thinking about, I think, for many years to come. So that is Zone of Interest, which is still out in cinemas in the UK, and check it out if you can.
In May 1940, Amsterdam was taken over by the Germans. Immediately, they set the clock forward, so it was the same time in Amsterdam as in Berlin. The weather report disappeared from the newspapers. It was now a military secret. All streetlights were turned off. Dutch organizations were Nazified or forbidden. Soon, the Nazis started to ban Jews from parks, pools, shops, cafes and schools, from all public life. Music by Jewish composers could no longer be played. In 1941, they started rounding people up. In 1942, the deportations began.
All right, so the final film we're going to review after us reviewing Zone of Interest is Occupied City, similar in its subject matter. It's a documentary film, and it was directed by British filmmaker Steve McQueen, but also produced by his partner and wife, Bianca Sticker, and who wrote the book Atlas of an Occupied City, Amsterdam, 1940 to 1945. This is a incredibly long film, so 4.5 hours, I believe, with a 15-minute intermission, and it primarily focuses on the city of Amsterdam, and its primary footage is documentary footage of Amsterdam during a very particular time. You see that there's a lot of masks, so we're talking about documenting the city during the COVID crisis, and narration written by Bianca, and Melanie Hyens does the narration, and is very much about the story of the Holocaust and the German occupation of the city. And we go to many, many different addresses, and sort of very kind of I wouldn't say dully, but it's systematically take us to every sort of address in the city where something's happened, a Jewish person has died, or this was a place where people were rounded up. And so it goes through very different, all these places, but you see the modern day footage, and then you hear what happened in history. So both of those worlds are very sort of different, and what's happening maybe during the day now sort of makes you think about those two things together, or maybe it doesn't. So I was wondering what you guys thought about it. It's a feat in of itself to watch such a long film at once in one sitting, if you did or if you do. But I'd be curious what you think about the film as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's a monumental achievement. It's quite something to watch. It's an intense experience in a very different way to Zone of Interest. So I saw this at a GFT screening, Glasgow Film Theatre screening, with a live Q&A afterwards. So I was sat in the cinema for the entire 4.5 hours, in the dark. I couldn't look at my phone to distract myself or anything. I was just singularly focused on these stories from occupied Amsterdam. And I found it a really meditative experience. I found myself, because you have the two parallel lines in some ways. In one hand, you've got the contemporary footage of COVID, of Amsterdam under COVID, of climate protests and stuff like that. You have these narrative threads weaving in this modern stuff, and you have the narration giving details of what happened during the occupation and stories of Jewish people being sent away to extermination camps, of being murdered in the streets, and of resistance fighters planning against the occupying force. So I found myself, I would drift into one or the other. So I would get so focused on the contemporary footage, on like children sledging, or people attending an anti-vax protest or whatever, that I would find my thoughts drift into that, and then the narration would suddenly pull me out of it when I hear, another person was murdered in the streets or murdered in their home, and it snapped me between those two parallel lines of the documentary in a really interesting way. So I found myself, drifting into this meditative state where it all kind of flowed over me. And there's a terrific sequence in not the middle of the film, probably in the first half, where it's drifting through. There's no narration over this bit. It is just music, and the camera drifts through Amsterdam streets at night, flipping and turning around, and it felt so intensely like about a year ago I was wandering through Rotterdam at night, having done a work thing there, and it just felt like wandering through those Rotterdam streets at night, but it was on film. I felt a real connection to it. So yeah, the film kind of flowed over me and generated this intensity of emotion that was quite unexpected, really. But quite different to Zone of Interest, and yet there's these similarities.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say it's like a meditative quality to the film, and the way that it kind of like washes over you, because it is so it like feels quite relentless in terms of like the amount of addresses that it goes to. You feel like you're like, even like the delivery of the narration kind of sounds like a audiobook style, like the delivery doesn't have the emotion that the words have, and it kind of becomes quite mesmerizing in a way that you kind of like get into this trance, and you do kind of like start focusing on the visuals, and then you get pulled back by the audio. So it is like, like reckoning the past with the present. And it's, I know that before you got into making narrative features, Steve McQueen did a lot of work in art installations, and I feel like this is kind of like a return to that style of work, where the form of it is very testing and quite challenging, and of course, like it's very long. I actually watched this film at home rather than in the cinema, and I feel like maybe the impact of watching it in the cinema and being not like trapped, but being like like you're there, you're in the seat for the long haul, whereas like when you're at home, what it's like. I took my 15-minute intermission was probably a little longer than a 15-minute intermission, because I think I needed a longer break before I went back to it. So I probably didn't get the desired effect. But like art that might be in a museum or a art installation that's playing in a gallery, I feel like each audience member might get a slightly different like experience, and because this is so long, it's impossible to take in every fact and every piece of information that gets given to you, because it is just relentless, and it's very cruel in terms of like these stories about Amsterdam-based Jews during the World War, where you think like you hear about their kind of mini victories, or the things that they did, and ultimately the stories all end the same, and that they get sent to a concentration camp, or they get killed in their house or killed in the street, and it's so brutal that it just feels like it's like unfair, merciless, and and the stories that are being told to you, but told in such an interesting way. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, a very unique experience.
Both of these films we've discussed and you've both said are two like they both have two elements of them like sort of in dialogue with each other, and it's that dialogue that is creating the emotion. But just to take the actual scenes of modern day Amsterdam, like it's very like along the lines of observational films like Frederick Weissman, I would even say, like these long kind of films where you sort of spend time just observing. And just if I was to turn off the narration and the noise, I would say it's such a skill the way Amsterdam is being, and you were bringing that up with the nighttime and stuff like that, the way Amsterdam is being portrayed as a city. So like a man with a movie camera kind of film that you can, and as someone, I mean, I go to the documentary festival there a few times. Like you spend a lot of time walking the streets, you know, back and forth to different, and it's incredible just to kind of see how well that film captures the daily life of or the life over seasons, you know. So that I know that both Steve McQueen and Bianca live there, so that's their home, and this is perhaps in some ways the the COVID kind of film that maybe Barbie was to Noah and Greta. On the other hand, I think the thing is when you live in a place like Amsterdam or Berlin, I think I feel that way too. When you go through the city, you feel the history of that place, and I think you often knowing that impact and that massive history of trauma that happens to a city, you know, that's already present in your mind when you're watching kids play or sledding or whatever. You think those things because of the architecture you see, or what you know what you know has happened by the books you've read or whatnot. So I think it's another, like you said, monumental, incredible feat to have this dialogue happening in these two ways and to have to process that. And I agree with you both that I slid back and forth, and it was not easy for me to put. It's almost like trying to multitask. It's not easy for me to be listening to the story and then paying attention to a really well put together observational documentary film. I liked it a lot. I think, yeah, I mean, my attention span did drift, and, you know, so I don't know if I was the best observer, but I think maybe that's the point, and I think that's maybe the...
I was going to say, I think that's the point. I don't think you're expected to take in all these stories, because, you know, I did find myself drifting and sort of felt bad for that at the start. I felt like I should be paying attention. I should be focused a bit more. But then I was like, but I've got 4 hours left of this. I can afford to drift off into my own thoughts. And I do think that's the intention. Like Gary said, I think he's very much influenced by his visual art background here. And the kind of, it turns into, I think it is a visual art piece. It's the kind of installation that you would have in a gallery where you wander in and you wander out and you sit for 10 minutes or whatever. He's talked about, they covered everything in Bianca Stitker's original book. So there is a 36-hour version of this documentary that they've cut together, which you can imagine running as a visual art installation where you're not supposed to sit through the whole thing, but you can dip in and out. And yeah, I think it's very influenced by that visual art tradition and essay film. Actually, I saw a lot of parallels with kind of Laura Mulvey's work on the essay film throughout. Yeah, I think it's also interesting to think about in relation to Zone of Interest. And we talked about Claude Lanzmann's idea that you can't use archive footage to represent this kind of thing. You can't depict the Holocaust directly. And this is doing that in an interesting way. Again, you know, parallel to the Zone of Interest. Steve McQueen was asked at the Q&A at the Barbican last week whether he'd thought about using archive film, whether archive film would add anything to the film, to the experience. And he very clearly said, no, that would have been a different film. That wasn't the film he was making. And I think, yeah, this is another attempt to stick by Lanzmann's principle that you can't use archive footage to depict this history, you have to find a new way of depicting it, which is what I think he's done here.
There's just been so many historical sort of conversations around that, Night and Fog being the first, which like mixes the two, and then Sorrow and the Pity. And so there's this, and Showa being that response to all those. I always wonder when these films come out if we're saying anything new, or we have a new way of, like a new format or a new expression. And this film does something different in the line of decades of films around this subject in a way that had an impact on me, in a different way, but in an equally haunting way. I'm obviously not going to be able to walk around Amsterdam again without not thinking about this film, and the importance again of history sort of being buried. Like there's this constant sort of, in the unemotional way the narration goes to tell the story of things being demolished. And I think a lot about having lived in New York, and I think just that like that constant demolished is something that was powerful, in the sense of that we're erasing history if we don't, and that this brings it back in sort of in a layered way to what a city actually is. So it was incredible, and the time and duration is the film. It's the duration is the experience, and it's like boredom. I know a lot of people actually said it was boring. I don't see how. It's a lot for you to keep your attention, and I think that's part of the practice, as you've all said, like with the art element of it. But I can't see how it's boring to me. Like it's not like both sides of it are interesting. For it's actually like trying to focus on which one.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it's challenging and it's testing, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's boring. There's always something interesting going on screen. Even if I think, like you say, the running time of the film really makes the film, and it kind of creates the viewer experience in the way that the way that you might drift in and out of the audio or the visuals, and it really it's like an art installation on the big screen. Yes, very, very well made, very powerful.
Yeah, I was never bored. I drifted off, like I said, but I was never bored. I was thinking about, when I wasn't thinking about the Holocaust or the Nazi occupation of Amsterdam, I was thinking about how these contemporary issues that it layers in, COVID, the kind of anti-vax protests, the rise of the far right in the Netherlands, which in their last election, the far right party got the most votes, which is, devastating for a lot of my friends over in the Netherlands. And then climate change. At the end, it comes in with climate protests, which I think must have been around COP when it was in Glasgow, because a few people mentioned Glasgow. So kind of some chuckles in the audience at Glasgow Film Theatre.
Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I was always thinking of something,
I mean, it's clearly intentional because they edited it together, but I think it's sometimes you're thinking about what they're saying, the filmmakers, by putting that footage on top of the narration, and an occupied city, and yet this was, like you said, the rise of the far right coming in, or the response to closing down a city having to close down for a public health crisis. So it's fascinating, and I think I have lots of questions to think about. I wonder if the 36-hour will sit in a museum someday. Who knows?
Yeah,
definitely.
Great. So that is Occupied City, and it is available at some cinemas, and I'm sure it will be be able to be streamed in the near future as well. So check it out when and how you can. I'm here with Martine Benchemal, who is the director of The Castle, which is playing as a part of our Cinetopia doc program and as part of Iberodoc's 10th edition. Martine, thanks so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for the invitation. For me, it's beautiful, this moment.
And what drew you to the story of the castle specifically? I'm really curious how you met these two characters to begin with.
Actually, I met them by accident because I was shooting my previous film around the area. As I was looking for some characters, it was a film about healers, and they told me you have to to meet a healer around the castle. And I know I drive to this place, and when I saw this castle in the middle of the field, I just wanted to meet the people who lived there, and I saw Justina working around the house, and I thought she was the worker. So I I asked her, "Hi, I want to meet the owner of the place," and she told me, "I am the owner. Just come in," and that's how our friendship, I can say, started. And it was like 7 years ago. So from this first meeting, I started visiting the castle and writing a script. So yeah, because at the beginning I thought that I will start it a documentary, like a pure documentary. But luckily I started writing, and for example, Alexia, when I met them, she was 14 years old. And as she started growing up, the bond between them started having new layers. So that's why I'm very grateful about no starting shooting the first day.
Yeah. I mean, that brings us to a really good point that your film's been called docufiction, so it's genre bending, and you recreated the scenes with the two real characters, wrote a script, and had them reenact certain moments. Can you discuss why you chose this hybrid approach? I mean, I think it's fascinating how this all happened.
Actually, because when Justina told me her story, I felt a very strong dramatic arc in her life. So when I started shooting, because I have observational scenes, I felt something more calm than the story. So that's why I made a kind of timeline, and I choose the stronger points for my point of view, and I decided to focus the film in their present, not go into the past, because they have it's huge, the story. I mean, you can make 8 chapters. So I decided to focus on the relationship, the present relationship between them. So that's why I needed to be very accurate with the scenes, very precise with the storytelling. So I started trying with them, but let's play, let remember when you sold your last cow or something like that. It was amazing because they could play their lives, make a new version of the story. So the Alexia Justina that appears in the screen, of course, they are the real ones, but they are revisiting and rewriting their own lives. So for me, it was very, new, the way, the approach, because I wrote a script, but of course I didn't make the film that I wrote, because, we shoot in 3 stages. So after the first stage of shooting, the film changed it 100%. For example, I wrote a different ending, because as it is an emancipation story, I wanted to Justina sell the house, and that was for me at the beginning the idea of emancipation. But while we were working on the film, I understood that this is not the idea of emancipation that Justina feels, because she starts the film being the owner. So the ownership is not the legal ownership is not the topic. It's like the symbolic ownership. So that's why she living in the house with the animals and resting. It's the way that she can liberate herself. And I learned it working with them.
What was it like directing Justina and Alexia? I mean, they're non-actors playing themselves, but I mean, so how much was there like a direction? I mean, anytime, even in any documentary, as fly on the wall as it is, the presence of the camera makes things change. So I think it's very great to see you recreating sort of parts of their lives and them playing themselves. And I think that's really fascinating. But I was wondering how it was to direct Justina and Alexia.
Wow, amazing. There were like two different, and I can say opposite ways of directing with both. Alexia loved the acting as a work also. I mean, she wants to start acting now. And she loves to hear my indications and to take like to build the scene, like to work as an actor. But Justina, in my point of view, she wasn't acting, she was living the scenes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the scenes that we played were from their universe. So, for example, when Alexia is leaving the house, the first time she tries to live with the family, it was the first time that Justina saw her daughter leaving. So she wasn't acting, she was like feeling the situation of being alone. So it was very different. And when I said a scene like wasn't from the universe of Justina, it was very clear because she was like very, like, I don't know, hard, and it wasn't her.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Amazing. So one of the things that I really love from the moment it starts is the music. So the music really sets the tone for the film. It's sort of has this Henry Mancini, old Hollywood orchestral sort of feel. And I feel like it makes the locations opulent and otherworldly, even if they're sort of broken down and like broken down dreams. But just tell me a little bit about how and why you sort of created this tone through this music and who you worked with to do that. I love it. And I mean, with the titles too, it just has that sort of, opulence to it.
Yes. Yeah. In the beginning, I didn't think in put music, but during the editing process, we started making some sequences, and it was like, okay, that's that's the mood. And well, it opened like a new approach because we could play with the story, and we could be because we used to say this is a kind of fairy tale, a dark fairy tale, or I don't know, and we just put the music that we needed for this mood. And well, it was a kind of, yes, like a like an old Disney music, or we thought like what kind of music could have sounded in the parties that they celebrated in the castle. So it was like the sound of the previous castle sounding now.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And then it opened like a playful approach. For example, with the thunder breaks. I mean, it's the previous owner sending the rain.
Yeah.
For us, it's like it's we playing with the idea of the fairy tale.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, they're playful, almost comedic sort of elements with animals walking through. I think that's what makes me really love the film. Because I think it's tender but also playful and whimsical. So, one thing though, on the other side of that, I think I was particularly drawn to the conversations that Justina was having with her lover, I guess, who lives in another town. Which sometimes comes across as like sad and isolating. And I think maybe also not just, I mean, the music being playful, but the but the location be feeling isolating and sort of lonely is very part of the theme of the film. I wanted to know if you could talk about that. I mean, were some of those scenes real, or how and why is that an important part of the story?
Yeah. It's because I was realizing that it's a film also about the loneliness and how she deals with it. And yes, I mean, Enrique, the lover exists. And we rebuilt the scenes because we recorded some conversations, but I needed precise scenes. So we re-recorded everything, but we use textual from him, like when he's saying, "I want to live with you. I want to leave my place. I move into the castle to, I don't know, to have animals." It's the real one speaking in the voice of another man.
Wow!
And it was amazing because Justina was acting her relationship with Enrique and putting a new layers and putting a new, I don't know, it was very refreshing for her.
Yeah.
Told me, I mean, because it's a complex relationship.
Yeah, of
First
course.
of all, I started searching why this man is not visiting her. But then I understood that they both are chatting all days, and it's a way of relationship also for both, because he's very alone also.
Yeah, absolutely, and complex. And I think again, this idea of fairy tale, your imagination kind of goes wild to think why and how and what's going on the other side. So really fascinating part of the story. What I absolutely love about your film is that it's both lush and intimate, and we talked a lot about that intimacy. You fall in love with the characters immediately. But I also think it's I would imagine it's a very particularly Argentine film, because it deals with class and racial discrimination and around those who are from indigenous communities, which the two characters are. I wondered if, I guess there's nuances that maybe I didn't notice, but I wondered how Argentine audiences will respond to this versus, it's been shown around the world, and and how different audiences are responding to it.
It's quite funny because I made an interview last Saturday, and they told me exactly the opposite. They told me, "Wow, this is not a pure Argentine film." So because it's not common, the story here. I mean,
right.
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's not an Argentinian issue. This situation is very weird here too. So, of course, it's closer for us, the situation with the family, this kind of mid-class, decadent family. And yeah, this is very, I can say, Latin more than Argentine, from Latin America, I mean. But yeah, here it's a weird story also. Because I think it's weird from a housekeeper or a worker being owner of a huge place.
Yeah.
But this is the break in the timeline, in the historic timeline that this film makes. But yeah, it's not. I think it's not a very Argentine Yeah, it doesn't have a Argentine mood.
No, that's very interesting. What it did, when I first read the description, is I thought of the famous Maisels film, Grey Gardens, and is what made me actually go see the film in the beginning. And it's a film I love and spent a lot of time thinking about. But it's often criticized for the role in telling or exposing the stories of the women. But I think the castle's tone is very compassionate, and I was just curious on how their relationship with the film has been. I've seen that they've kind of traveled around with the film a couple times, and how your relationship with them has grown since the film's been. I mean, again, you said you've been working with them for quite a few years, but maybe how your relationship has grown with the characters that you've been working with for so long.
It's beautiful to hear Alexia speaking about the film. Actually, when we traveled with them, I mean, we presented the film in San Sebastian and in Biarritz, of course, in Argentina too. But Alexia, well, Justina said, I go to anywhere, but I don't speak. So it's the same than in the film. And Alexia is like the representative of Justina, and she loves to speak, and she prepared different version of her answers to the question that she's supposed to receive.
Yeah.
So she loves to be like in front of the camera to make interviews, because well, they used to say that they love the film. They feel very represented by the film, and it was very I know, refreshing for them showing the film here in Argentina with the family. It was like not a revenge, but a kind of, because we didn't speak about that, but the real family, I mean, they visited the castle when we were shooting, and there is an observational scene in the kitchen when Alexia is very angry because they will visit the day after. And this is a pure documentary scene. I mean, they are arguing, in fact. So the day after, the family arrived in the castle and they made this invasion and stuff, and I didn't shoot them. So we recreated this with my family.
Oh,
so
wow.
The family that appears in the film is my mother, my father, my aunt, my cousin. So it was very funny. It was a chaos, but it was very, I don't know, kind of, cathartic for Alexia and Justina to shoot to my father, to say fuck off to my family. So showing this film in Argentina was very, I mean, it's supposed to be hard, but the family saw the film and it was everything okay.
Wow.
So for them was like kind of making a step forward with this relationship, because they could say, no, please don't come this weekend, for example.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Real work, not in the film. I mean, in both.
Incredible. And so it was the actual screening that kind of made, that this has been, but this relationship has evolved then. Yeah. Amazing. So what has happened to Alexia and Justina since you stopped filming the castle? I mean, they're still in the castle, they're still working. Is it the same kind of struggles that you see, that throughout the film, or is there any, updates that we can know about?
Oh, yes. First of all, the film, of course, paid them very well. We rebuilt a lot of scenes with the leak, with the roof. I mean, we fixed it. We and they, I mean, the castle is very much better now. And they are still living there. And Alexia is working in a closer field, driving a truck. So it's not Formula 4, but it's a kind of driving work. And I don't know, for now, she's not living, Alexia. I mean, maybe to Lobos, which is the closer city, but not Buenos Aires, not now.
Yeah, I'm so torn because I want Alexia to go to the big city, and follow her dreams. But then at the same time, I feel for her mother, needing her there, and that bond is so special. And I think you really capture that well. I also want to talk about the length, because I read another interview you have done, and this is a feature film, but it's on the shorter side. And you had made a comment about wanting to make the film, every scene matter, and I wanted to because you had time to plan it and recreate it. What was your thoughts in terms of length and scenes and all of that, and how that came about in the edit?
Yes. I mean, I didn't plan the length, but during the editing, we with Anita Ramon, the editor, we wanted to be very, precise. And because the film, for us, needed to be, to not to go to different places, and because it's not like a mood in the castle, like watching the real life and the daily life. So that's we wanted to be like like with the storytelling. And yeah, for me, cinema, I mean, all the minutes in the cinema for me, it's like very high pressure. Like I want to put, I don't know, because actually the film, when you put that like a scene that wasn't for the storytelling, like going down a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, in the mood, because it's a very sad story in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we wanted to tell in a way that I think it's a story of emancipation.
Yeah.
So we needed to be like close to the story all the time, because it could be darker than reality, because actually they are more or less good in the castle. I mean, but as we rebuild all the struggles they had to, you know, to superate, it could be a darker film than we have. So we needed to be, yes, on the story all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to put the music and make this storytelling more or less accurate.
Yeah, I mean, and that is exactly what happens. I think it's really complex, which is why I love it so much, because it's fun and playful with everything we've talked about, and it's beautiful. But it's also, there is this element of sadness and loneliness and complexity, you know, to life. That's a challenging life that you get out of the film, which I absolutely love. This is, I heard, your solo debut, solo debut. You've done many films before, or other films before, but what's next for you as in terms of a filmmaker?
I'm developing something around the area that I don't want to tell the new topic, but it's in the more or less the same mood with real actors, and and more or less with this approach that I loved, like a kind of storytelling with real stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if a documentary or fiction or this, more or less that you saw, because I enjoy very much writing. I mean, putting like the world in a film, for me demands a lot of operations of storytelling, and for me it's amazing. It's this way of filmmaking.
Speaking of the area then, so you're going back to La Pampa to do, or near that area. Do you have some personal connection to it, or how did you sort of, I mean, this film has made me want to go, and people say there's not much there, but you know, I'm just curious what's your connection to the area?
Well, actually, I'm not from Buenos Aires. I'm from the outsides, but it's a city. It's not a field, like the countryside, like these films. But my father used to work in the countryside, so I used to go with him to see the cows and stuff. So, and I don't know, it's a place that I like to go to film, actually. And maybe because here in the city, because I live in Buenos Aires in the city, there are a lot of situations going around, and for me it's easier to focus in one situation in the countryside. I mean, but I like to film there. For me it's easier. For me it's like traveling, filming while traveling. And it's a place that I used to go with my father, so it's in a way I feel it closer and familiar.
Absolutely. It's an idyllic. It looks just absolutely stunning in your film. I can thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I know that it's been it's going to be at Iberodocs, where it has been at Iberodocs, but it will be in other we'll continue to travel as well, and then I think make it on various TV, or what's the plan for the film?
Well, now I'm going to Toulouse, to France.
Great.
Yeah, to the festival, and then I think we will make a screening in Paris because
Wow.
this is a French co-production,
Right.
so they are planning to make a screening also in Paris, and maybe in TV, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not working in the distribution, but I hope you can watch it on TV.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Martin, for taking the time to chat with us. And I just absolutely love watching your film over, and I've now seen it 4 times, and I'm excited for the 5th. So, so thanks again.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. Well, that's our show for February already, 2024. And so we're all going to be back on the Glasgow Film Festival special coming soon. But I guess that's what we're all looking forward to, right? It'll be a lot of films. And we'll be probably going over to Glasgow as much from Edinburgh, or Simon, you're in Glasgow. But anything else you guys are looking forward to?
You know, I've just started to pick up on the Dune Part 2 had its London premiere the other day. So I've just started to pick up on this Dune hype, kind of in the background. So I might try and squeeze Dune in again between kind of the Oscar films I've been watching and the Glasgow Film Fest upcoming. I might try and squeeze Dune in again.
Yeah, I think at least a YouTube recap of Dune Part 1 might be useful before watching the second one. I'm trying to think, aside from Glasgow Film Festival, there's a film called Perfect Days by Wim Wenders that I think comes out next weekend. So that's another one that's on my list to see. But yeah, I'll be watching Glasgow films for the next wee while, and heading through there on the 2nd of March. So I might see you in Glasgow, Simon. I'm sure we'll.
Yeah, great.
And if you don't, are not completely overwhelmed with the Glasgow film, I'm also working with and as a producer of Iberodocs, and Iberodocs is also in Glasgow and Edinburgh. So it's Ibero-American, Spanish and Portuguese speaking documentaries, and it'll be from the 21st to the 2nd of March. And it's CCA for the first week, and French Institute for the second week. And so there's some really fantastic documentary films. Cinetopia Doc is doing the first tomorrow with one of my favorite films from Sheffield Doc Fest we reviewed on this podcast. And we did also have the interview earlier with The Castle. So very excited to screen that at Cameo. So obviously, if you guys want to check out those films as well, make sure to take some time to do that. And yeah, that's our show. So thank you both so much for joining me. And I think it was really, really amazing films this month. And so hopefully we'll continue on that trajectory going forward in the next few months.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.